We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Aleph Amid Beis in Mesechet Kesuvos. This is Kesuvos Daf 101b. The Gemara here continues Rav Huna's statement, Bila oseh kayam, and if a woman commits adultery, she does not lose out on her worn clothing that are still in existence, meaning to say the nichse milug that she's able to take with her. Rashi over here says, Bila oseh kayam, and below shein kayam, and the worn out clothing that are still there in front of us, lo hifsida, she has not lost out. Tani Tano Kame de Rav Nachman, a Tana taught in front of Rav Nachman, Zinsa hifsida b'losa kayamin, that if she committed adultery, she does lose out on these worn out clothing. So Amar Leis, Rav Nachman said to this Amora who taught this Braisa, he said to him, Im hi zinsa kela mizanoi, just because she committed adultery, do you think that her kalim, her vessels, her garments, did they commit adultery? Tani, rather it should be taught, lo hifsida b'losa kayamin, that she doesn't lose out on these worn out clothing. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabba bar bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Zu divrei Rabbi Menachem stimta. This is the opinion of Rabbi Menachem, who is often found in a Stam Mishnah and in a Stam Braisa. Aval Chachamim Omer, but the Chachamim say, Zinsa lo hifsida v'lo oseh kayam, and that again, if she commits adultery, she does not lose out on these worn out clothing that are still in front of us. And Rashi over here explains, Zu divrei Rabbi Menachem hastama de tani tana kame de Rav Nachman ifsida. What he's saying is this Stam Braisa, which was taught by the Amora who taught Braisas, and he taught in front of Rav Nachman, that she does lose out on these below seh, on these worn out garments. Rabbi Menachem Omer, that's really just the opinion of Rabbi Menachem. That's how they're explaining that teaching, that Braisa. Distimtahu harbe mishmu osav nishnu Stam and mishnu Braisa. Many of Rabbi Menachem's teachings, even though they're really only a das yochid, they're only his opinion, but they're taught in Mishnah and in Brises as Stam opinions without attribution. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, let's say originally the man marries the woman and he knows that she's an islandess, so then it's treated like a regular marriage. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna says, islandess isha ve'eno isha. When it comes to an islandess, so she's sort of like a wife and sort of not like a wife. But almana, when it comes to a widow, isha gemura, that's completely like a wife. And the Gemara explains Rav Huna's statement. Islandess isha ve'eno isha. When we say that an islandess is a wife but not a wife, so then it depends. Hikarba yesh la ksuba. If he realized all along that she was an islandess, so then she receives her ksuba. Lo hikirba, but if he married her, he didn't realize at the time that she was an islandess, that she was underdeveloped. So ain la ksuba, so then she doesn't get the ksuba. But almana, but when it comes to a widow, isha gemura, she's considered a full wife. Bein hikirba, bein lo hikirba, doesn't matter whether he realized she was an almana, whether he didn't realize it. Yesh la ksuba, she will receive a ksuba. But Rav Yehuda says, Achazu v'achazu, no, in both cases, Isha v'yeino Isha, it's a wife, but it's not a wife. We don't make a distinction between an islandess and an almana. Hikir ba yesh la ksuba, if he realized what she was, so then she gets the ksuba. Lo hikir ba, but if he didn't realize till after that she was either an almana or an islandess, ein la ksuba, then she does not receive a ksuba. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question on Rav Huna from the following Braisa. Kansa b'cheskas shikein, if he marries an almana with the presumption that she's an almana, v'nimtza shikein, it turns out she's an almana, yesh la ksuba, so then she gets the ksuba. So hastama ein la ksuba, it sounds like in a stam situation of an almana, she does not get a ksuba. And that sounds like Rav Yehuda, it does not sound like Rav Huna. And so the Gemara says, Lo teima hastama in la ksuba. Don't make that diuk that in a stam situation an almana won't get a ksuba. Ela ema, rather say as follows: Kansa becheskas she'ena kain. If he married her with a presumption that she's not an almana, v'nimtzas she'kain, and it turns out she is an almana, so it's completely the opposite of what he was told. So ein la ksuba. So then she wouldn't get a ksuba. But the Gemara says that doesn't make sense either. Aval stama mai. But according to that, you're saying that the Braisa would imply that in a stam situation, what would be the halacha? Isla. Apparently, she would get the ksuba. But adatani becheskas she'kain v'nimtzas she'kain yesh la ksuba. But then, instead of the Braisa saying that if there was a presumption that she was an almana and she turned out to be an almana, she gets a ksuba. Lishmin and stamba, the Braisa should have just said that a stam almana gets a ksuba. The kol shekein, and certainly if there was a chazaka, she was an almana and she turned out to be an almana, of course she's going to get the ksuba. V'yotani, and further was taught, kansa biyadua v'nimtzas biyadua yesh la ksuba. It says that if he married her knowing everything and it turns out it was known, so then she gets the ksuba. Kansa stam ein la ksuba. But again, it says explicitly by the almana that if there was no presumption, if it was just a stam marriage, she does not get the ksuba. To yufta de Rav Huna, this seems to be a refutation of Rav Huna. It seems to be even by an almana that in a stam situation she would not receive the ksuba. And the Gemara continues, Rav Huna masnisan atise. Rav Huna was actually misled by the phrasing of our Mishnah. Because who saw him to come maflik ba'islandess? Because he thought, since the Mishnah makes a distinction between when he realized she was an islandess and when he didn't realize her, when it was stam, so then he thought that distinction distinction is only by an ailonis. V'lo kamaflik ba'almona, the Mishnah doesn't make a distinction by an almona. Mechlal d'almona afilu b'stam nami yisla. It sounded to him like the Mishnah was saying that by an almona, even in a stam situation, she would receive the ksuba. V'loi, but it's not true. Ki katani lo la'almona aplugsa d'ailonis kai. When we teach about an almona, we're already going on the distinction that we made by an ailonis, meaning the same distinction that applies by an ailonis is the same distinction that will apply by an almona. Hadran aloch almona nizonis. We will return to you perek almona nizonis. This is the conclusion of the 11th perek of Mesechet Kesubos. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 12th perek of Mesechet Kesubos. And the parak begins with the Mishnah, Hanosei eso isho paska imo kadesha yazun es bita chamesh shanim. Let's say a person marries a woman, and she has a daughter from a previous marriage, and he makes an arrangement that he will support this daughter for 5 years. Chayev lazuna chamesh shanim. He's obligated to support that daughter for 5 years. Niziz la'acher. Let's say the situation is she now marries someone else, meaning she leaves her first husband who was going to support her daughter for 5 years. She marries another man. Upaska imo kadesha yazun es bita chamesh shanim. And then she makes an arrangement with him, with the second husband, that he should support her daughter for 5 years. So chayiv lazuna chamesh shanim. So he also has to support the daughter for 5 years. Lo yomar harisha. Now the first husband shouldn't say l'cheshetavo etzli azona, that I'm only going to support her when she's by me. But now that we're not married any longer, forget it. He can't say that. Elamolech la mizonos. Rather, he has to bring her food. He has to bring her mizonos l'makom she'ima, to the place where she is with her mother. He has to bring her mizonos. V'chein lo yomru shneim. And similarly, the Mishnah says both husbands shouldn't say hare anu zonin ech ke'echad. We'll support her together. We'll combine to support her for these 5 years. We'll both pitch in. Elo echad zonin no. Rather, one of them has to provide the mizonos, the sustenance. The echad nosin lo demei mizonos. The other one has to give the value, the money of the mizonos. They're both under obligation to give this daughter mizonos for 5 years. Nisis habal. Let's say you have a situation. Let's say you have a situation where she gets married, meaning this daughter gets married. Habal nosin la mizonos. So then her husband has to give her mizonos, as is the regular arrangement by a marriage. Vehein nosin la demei mizonos. And also these stepfathers, they have to give her the value of the mizonos because they still owe the mizonos, even though she's married and she's getting it from her husband. Meisu. Now let's say you have a situation where these stepfathers die. So b'noseihen nizonos minachasim b'nei chorin. So their own daughters, they get mizonos from the estate, but they only get it from free property. They can't get it from the chasim mishubadim, from encumbered property with a lien on it. V'hi nizonos minachasim mishubadim. But she, meaning the stepdaughter, she's even allowed to collect from the chasim mishubadim mipnei she kabalas chov, because she's like a creditor. She's like somebody who has a shtar, and she can even go to the nechasim mishubadim, to those people who purchased the property from these stepfathers. Hapikchim. Now the Mishnah concludes those who are wise, hayukosvim. So if they would get married with a stipulation to support the wife's daughter, to support their stepdaughter, they would write it into the ksuba as follows: Al menaz she'ezonas bitcha chameshanim kozman sha'atimi. It's on the condition that I'm going to support your daughter for 5 years if you are with me, if we're still married. But if we're no longer married, I do not have that obligation. And the Gemara says, Itmar, we have the following machlokas amoroim. If a person says to his friend, I'm obligated to give you a mon and to give you 100 dinar. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev, Reish Lakish Amar Potter. Rabbi Yochanan says that's an obligation, he has to give him the 100 dinar. Reish Lakish says he's Potter. The Gemara says, Hechidami, what exactly is the case that they're arguing about? If the case over here is he has witnesses and he says, you are my witnesses that I'm obligated, so my time of the Reish Lakish to Potter. So what would be the reason of Reish Lakish that the person is Potter? Certainly he should be Chayev in a case of Atem Eidai. And he delo Amar Lu Atem Eidai. If he didn't say to the witnesses, you are my witnesses, so my time of the Rabbi Yochanan to come Chayev. What's the reason of Rabbi Yochanan that the person should be Chayev? And the Gemara answers, Leolam delo kamar lu atem eidai. The case over here is where he didn't say atem eidai. And here the case is as follows. He said, I'm obligated to pay you 100 dinar and it's in a shtar. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Chayev. Rabbi Yochanan says he's Chayev. Alima milsa de shtara command Amar lu atem eidai edim dami. Because when you have something in a shtar, that's as strong as saying atem eidai. Reish Lakish Amar Potter, Reish Lakish says Potter, Lo Alima Milsa Deshtara, that the matter that's written in a star is not considered as strong as Atem Eidai. And Rashi over here explains, Ida Amar Lu L'Shomin Atem Eidai Shani Modelo. If again he says to the people who are listening, he says, you're my witnesses that I'm admitting that I owe him money, so then for sure he's chayiv. My time at Reish Lakish the Potter, Ha'anon Tanan B'Sanhedrin, we learned it in Sanhedrin and Mishnah, At Sheyomer B'Faneinu Hoda Lo Alma Hoda B'Fnei Edim Chayiv. It says clearly that if he admits in front of Edim, then he's going to be chayiv. And he lo amar lu l'shomen atem eidai. If he doesn't say to the people surrounding that you are my witnesses, my time with the Rabbi Yochanan, akaimal and hasam b'Sanhedrin, v'tzorach sheyomer atem eidai. It says in Sanhedrin, you have to have witnesses. You have to say, you are my witnesses that I owe the money. And the Gemara then answered, Liolam de lo amar lu atem eidai v'achamay askinan b'shtora shem maser lo shtar b'fonenu. The case is, he actually gave a shtar in front of us, v'chasabo, and he wrote in it, ani chayiv lachmona, that I'm chayiv 100 dinar to you, v'yava pishach zav yadu hoel v'lo chasam potter. And even though it's his handwriting, but he didn't sign it, and that's why there is a possibility that he's potter. Now, even though there's a Mishnah that says that if a person, if a creditor has the guy's handwriting, and in his handwriting it says he's chayiv, he is able to collect from free property. That's only if the guy writes, myself, so-and-so, he says his name, I borrowed a money from so-and-so, that's the case he's chayiv to pay. You see over there in that whole discussion of Abaya that it's clear we're talking about a signature, that he actually signs it. But over here, when we talk about a shtar, he's just writing simply chayiv ani lachmana, I'm chayiv to yomana, v'lo chasambo, and there is no signature. That's the machlokas Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, if he writes it down in a document but he doesn't sign it. So again, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the reason why he's chayiv is because writing it down in a shtar is the same as atem eidai, and Reish Lakish says it is not. Alima milsa deshtara ho b'fnei edim masur. Rabbi Yochanan says since he wrote it down in front of edim, so that's going to be enough, and Reish Lakish says it is not. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah. Very similar case. Person gets married to a woman, and he makes an arrangement that he's going to support her daughter, meaning his stepdaughter, for 5 years. He's obligated to support her for 5 years. And the Gemara assumes, my lav ki agavna, isn't it talking the same case that Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are discussing? Rashi says, my lav ki agavna, ma eidos yesh lo liachar zman b'dover zeh. What eidos, what testimony, what proof does she have to collect this money from him? Lav ki agavna, shemoser lo shtar b'fnei edim. Isn't this exactly the case? He gave a shtar in front of witnesses. V'chasabo, ploni kibel olav kach, and he said he's accepting this particular obligation. V'ein sham lo kinyan v'lo chasima. There's no kinyan that was made, and there's no signature. Do you have a shtar chasim? Because if she had a shtar that was signed, of course it's true. So it must be some kind of chiddush in the Mishnah. So isn't it exactly our case? And the Mishnah says the obligation does set in, and he owes the money. And so it seems to be a proof for Rabbi Yochanan. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Bey's Amud Aleph.